everyone. We're just waiting to let everyone get a chance to settle in into their little Zoom rooms. So welcome to another book chat at University Bookstore, part of their virtual Reading Aloud program, which you can check out on uBookstore's YouTube channel. Today, we are thrilled to welcome back Will Taylor, who you may remember from a few weeks ago when we were doing the exact same thing to celebrate the book launch of Catch That Dog. Thank you for holding that up, Will. This afternoon, we're here to celebrate his latest release, The Language of Seabirds. My name is Grace, and I'm the former events producer here at University Bookstore, and I now work for Seattle Arts and Lectures, but I have such a fond place in my heart for University Bookstore that you will be seeing me popping in from time to time to host and moderate some events. As I mentioned today, I have the pleasure of being in conversation with Will to celebrate his new book, following his conversation with Stephen Carter Bailey. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Stephen's actually on vacation in Northern Ireland right now, so we would love to hear where you're zooming in from. So please let us know in the chat. University Bookstore is the oldest independent bookstore in the region, and in fact, they're celebrating their 122nd anniversary this year. Will be stopping by the store to sign your orders next week, so when you check out using the link in chat to buy the book, please let them know if you would like a personalized book or a special inscription. Thank you for supporting this author event and a local indie bookstore. You can read more about the book and Will and Stephen using the link in chat, so I will keep this intro brief so we can get to the good stuff. Will Taylor is a reader, writer, and honeybee fan. He lives in the heart of downtown Seattle, surrounded by all of the seagulls and not quite too many teacups. When not writing, he can be found searching for the perfect bakery, talking to trees in parks, and completely losing his cool when he meets long-haired dachshunds. To read more about Will and his previous books, please visit willtaylorbooks.com. Stephen Carter Bailey was a Series 8 finalist for the Great British Bake Off and the winner of the 2019 Great New Year's Bake Off. He's made numerous appearances on ITV London News as a special reporter and hosts his own podcast, Feed My Curiosity. To read more about Stephen, please visit stephencarterbailey.co.uk or on Instagram at spongecakesquaretin. I love that Instagram handle. A few announcements before we start. This event is being recorded for later playback on our YouTube channel. And after the discussion portion, there will be a chance for audience Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A field at the bottom of your Zoom screens at any time during the talk, and we'll get to them at the end. And now here's Will and Stephen.
Thank you so much, Grace. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. This was a long time coming on this project, and it's amazing to finally be here. Just as some sort of framing, what's going to happen now is Stephen and I are going to chat for about 20 minutes. We're going to talk about how we met. We're going to talk about some queer podcasts that I came across that Stephen was on. We're going to talk about growing up without queer kidlit. That's kind of our main topic, and our different experiences with that. And I have one baking question for Stephen, which I'm going to throw in at the end, which is not too much of a curveball because it's from his podcast. But if you do have other little tidbit questions, you could throw those in the chat and we can maybe fit those in. Yeah, we're looking at about 20 minutes with us here. Then Stephen's going to return to his wonderful vacation, and Grace and I are going to talk more specifically about seabirds. So that's what's happening. And so, Stephen, thank you forever for being here. This is amazing. It doesn't feel, it's weird. We talk all the time now, but it doesn't feel real that you're here now.
We do sort of text every other day just to catch up, and it's usually semi-food based, occasionally about a book.
Because we met on Twitter and then sort of Instagram, because I replied to a tweet you had about having a cookie chat with someone, or a biscuit chat.
Yeah.
And then it just turned into this, I don't know.
I think you caught my attention with, it was with this book. It was with The Language of Seabirds, and that's that kind of, obviously, and your lovely content and your queer literature as well. But this particular book caught my attention, and you sent the sweetest, most lovely email, and you were so so British about?
I spent so much time trying to be like delicately asking if I can
You,
touch.
it was like an email from my mother asking if I'd like to come for Christmas, and I just thought, is he British?
Yeah,
So
actually, yeah.
so polite, and so
Awkward.
yeah, it was a language of seabirds that sort of caught my attention, and then we have bonded over a mutual love of
Yes,
bakeries and books and
Penelope
just
Keith. Yeah,
Penelope Keith as well,
Penelope
of
Keith.
course, who is my spiritual mother.
I love that we started with me reminding you of your mother. That's just such a great because I'd
My,
done my research and you'd been on Queer Talk podcast, and
yes, yeah.
Rav from Bake Off, was he your season?
No, he
No.
was. Let me think. Maybe the year before that. I lose track, honestly.
Yeah.
When we all get together, we have to. We even remind ourselves like what
So
we go by
many-
the year that we were on it. So I say 2017
He
or
was
2014.
still had
so.
Mary Berry, so yeah, it must have been at least the year before.
Yeah,
I think. And he had you on his podcast as well, and you talked about a lot of themes which overlapped with what I was writing about in Seabirds, which is why I wrote you the motherly email. You've said things I agree with. Let's chat about it. So would you, just for sort of context, would you mind giving us a sort of a quick background of how you grew up and your experience growing up gay in a community that wasn't necessarily ready for that?
Yes. So I think, Will, you and I are almost the same age, and so almost just a little bit younger. I would just like to caveat that I'm
Yes, even if
just
you're
slightly
younger than me,
younger.
World.
I grew up in I would suppose you could say a rural part of the home counties, which is the area just north of London. Very conservative, very normal, I suppose, normal life. There was nothing unusual about me or my childhood, but I suppose I had come from a split marriage. I had come from a Roman Catholic marriage, and then my mum remarried into the Mormon church, so I became Mormon at a very young age. Mix that with being in a rural location and being queer as well. You can see where I'm going with this. I had some turbulence in my childhood, I have to say, and I do like to make this very clear to everybody, which is I had the most wonderful. I have the most wonderful mother, sister, and friends who, I think made my childhood and then coming out and subsequent years so much easier. I mean, I don't think I suffered nearly as much as some people I know, so I'm very grateful to them. But still, I didn't have any representation whatsoever. I grew up in what's known as Thatcher's government, or Thatcher's Tory party. She led the way with Section 28, which essentially banned teaching of homosexuality in schools, or it was forbidden from teaching in schools. So that was the kind of subconscious messaging that I grew up with. Also, from a very, very young age, and I do remember some of the television adverts around the AIDS epidemic. I remember being taught subconsciously through messaging on television and conversations at the church and with adults around me and children, which was it was the fault of the gay people. It was it was God's punishment for gay people. I mean, these are words I heard. This is not, this is. So I had a very, I was very anxious growing up. I suppose I grew up with a lot of anxiety, and like I said, no representation whatsoever, especially in literature. I mean, literature's still lagging a little bit behind. We have wonderful programs nowadays. Queer as Folk, Heartstopper is the latest one, and there are others that are coming forward and getting a great deal of representation. But literature is where a lot of children get their first influences. I read the most wonderful books as a child. I loved The Borrowers. Yeah. But I was so excited when I read Seabirds, because I had that experience as a young boy, preteen, and I, oh my goodness, we would never have said anything. There was the sin surrounding this idea that you would have a romance, not just at that age, but with someone of the same gender. So it was lovely to read it, because it almost undid a lot of that turmoil that I remember feeling at around that sort of 11, 12, 13 years old. And it's easy to say, oh, I wish I'd had that, but you know what, I didn't. But I'm glad that the youth nowadays are getting it, because they deserve to live without the anxiety that I had. No one should have that. It's not, we don't need to be punished any more than we are already. So, and what's lovely about speaking about this book and posting about it on my social media is I'm getting great feedback, and I'm really pleased about it from schools, librarians, educators of young children about wanting copies, where can they get them, but also friends who have young queer children who are so, I won't get emotional, but who are so supportive of their children, saying, can I have a copy? Would it be suitable for my daughter, for my son? I would love for them to be able to have that, because for a lot of parents or caregivers, they don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be unsupportive, but they don't know how to be supportive. And books like this are a really soft way of just encouraging that sort of normality for these young queer people. And I think the less drama you put around it, the better. It's just about saying, oh, sorry guys, we missed you out of the whole growing up and all this stuff that we have to deal with as a teenager. Sorry, of course, queer kids are included. Coming into the circle, here's a book about you, so you can feel part of that sort of, that rite of passage that we all have to go through at that certain age. It was lovely to read, and like I said, I wish I'd had it, but I didn't. But I'm not upset about that.
Exactly why I wrote it was because I'll be reading the author's note that talks about this when we've finished up with Stephen, but it was about, the whole point of the book was I remembered the moment I had my first crush, and it was immediately eclipsed by fear. I felt this attraction. I had that first, oh, this is interesting and fun, and immediately fear. This is bad. You will be targeted for this. This is going to ruin things. And I very deliberately suppressed feelings of attraction and romance. And I had been a really romantic kid from then on, and it's still something I'm unpacking. I'm still trying to pull apart that immediate feeling that this is dangerous. And I think you talking about the AIDS crisis in particular, like the messaging was so loud when we were growing up. It was so constant and so present everywhere, and the lack of any counter messaging, particularly in the literature, like you said, that we have access to, was almost louder because there was nothing else to speak against the cultural feeling. And I was thinking what you said about literature in particular, more even so than media. Books for kids are a way where they can explore things that their parents don't necessarily know about. A kid can read a book almost hopefully more secretly than they could watch Heartstopper, say, if their parents don't want them watching it. It's harder to track books, and that's why I think queer literature is just so essential. There was something you talked about in one of those podcasts that I wanted to check in on that really stuck with me, when you talked about coming out to, I think, one of the ministers of your church, the Mormon church, and getting a really particular response of like, yes, it's okay to be gay, but would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was, I think I had a very passive experience with religion, and it was kind of, it wasn't sort of, there are some really dark programs out at the moment, especially around Mormonism and fundamental Mormonism. And I don't think I experienced that sort of degree of extremism, but it's the messaging, and it's that soft messaging. And sometimes that can be even more damaging, especially to a young, vulnerable mind. And I was a very quiet, I was actually quite a quiet child, believe it or not, and I was very shy, wouldn't ask questions, because I knew there was something bubbling inside of me that was different, and I knew that it wasn't going to be accepted. But around the time that I left the church, I was interested to hear what take on homosexuality was, because there really wasn't anything ever mentioned. They don't tend to talk about the negatives, they talk about the positives, which is, I guess, kind of nice, but it sort of skirts over like reality, because for a lot of us, the reality is that we don't want to follow the church's rules. Anyway, I had asked and said, about being gay, what's the church's standpoint on being gay or lesbian? Transgenderism really wasn't. It was, of course, it was a thing back then, but it was, it wasn't as spoken about as it was then. But yes, I asked a very basic question. I hadn't actually come out. I just sort of asked the question. I assume the question sort of gave me away, but I said, what's the stand on being gay? And it was, well, it's we understand, that's a thing, but we don't approve of it. But you can pray, go on your mission, and look at what God's plan is for you, and that is to marry and have children. I said, so you want me to be gay and marry and have children? And essentially that was the message. And I said, so what is it about, why are you so insistent I marry and have children? That's God's plan. You must marry a woman and have children. That's what will bring you closer to God. And I think I asked about, what if a straight couple couldn't have children for whatever reason, fertility reasons? And the answer was that they should just have faith. And I kind of just lost, I lost my respect for them, because there was no answer. It was just, there was so much ambiguity around the answer. And I thought, so I can be gay as long as I marry a woman and have children. And I made a decision at that point. I thought, I'm not going to live a really unhappy life. I know it's not that easy. I know it's not that easy for a lot of people, and I have always been very blessed and very privileged that I had such a strong parental figure and a sister and friend, who supported that. But for a lot of people, that isn't the case. And going down that route of doing what your community says is right for you is just easier. And I understand that the pain and the cost of extracting yourself from that, because it's not just leaving the church, you're leaving your support network. And imagine just being lost in space. That's the feeling of just that hopelessness. Like there is no worst feeling in the world. So I was lucky that I say got away. I wasn't in any danger. Well, I could have been, but I certainly wasn't going to give in and just marry some poor woman just because it was the right thing to do. So
I love that it seems like we're all in this part of our lives recreating sort of a new network of, like you were saying, like feeling lost if you leave the church or you leave that support network and not having anywhere to go, or any sort of not having any handholds almost of something else that you can do. And I think like putting out books like Seabirds was so important for me, because it's giving the kids nowadays something that I needed. But also your appearances on those podcasts. I mean, if you just search Stephen Carter Bailey on Spotify, you will find a very good show, which we will talk about in a moment. But you'll also find these episodes, and they are just so wonderful. I mean, just to hear someone else share that experience. I think you said that Seabirds was so familiar for you. You felt a lot of these experiences. And I felt the exact same way hearing you talk about yours, which is why I reached out. I was like, this is like, we had the same experiences on opposite sides of the world. And it makes me so hopeful that as more people get access to media and getting to share their stories, that we can essentially create this sort of network of like, you're not alone.
But this is our responsibility as queer adults, we all have a responsibility to guide the youth. And the thing is, if you suppress the youth, you'll just create the same problem again and again and again. And it's it's important that we march, we have pride marches. It's important that we have these events. It's important that we do all of these things that are public and seen and visual. But it's also important to have quiet conversations where we don't get angry, we don't shout, we just tell our story. So somebody who's struggling and alone and who can't have a conversation with a family member or friend knows that it's okay, because someone else has been through it, but they're an adult now and they're fine. So I know I can get there. But repeating my story again and again it's just about saying you really are not alone. You really don't have to worry as much as you are inside. You'll get that courage to come out. That first love isn't sinful. Experiences like your friends have are perfectly normal. And I wish there was a sort of a film about what we went through and not having that acceptance, and then a kind of a version of Seabirds, because as an adult now, what we had to suppress as teenagers has traumatized us as adults. So we lived, this is why we're all in therapy. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but I just think strip back the shame, because ultimately those children or young adults are going to, this is not, you can't change who they are. You can't pray it away. It's going to happen. Yeah. So you can either traumatize them and turn them into traumatized adults, or just allow that natural process to happen. And seabirds is just one of 1,000 fantastic ways of saying, do you know what, actually it's fine, it's normal, you're not weird. Yeah, you're 13, so you're weird, but everybody's weird at 13. But you're not weird because you're queer and looking for love. It's just, I'm just so happy that it's there, and I just kind of want to get it into every single school, in front of every single child, and all of those children who aren't queer, and just say, come, just so you can see what the other side of the coin, because there are queer kids out there. It might be your friend who you don't know about. This is what when I talk about exposure and bringing light to these things, it's not about sort of shining a big spotlight on it and screaming it from the rooftop. It's just saying, just be aware that other people in your group might be going through something else, or it might be a child or a niece or a nephew or anybody you don't know, because we're so good at keeping it quiet. But just I don't know more trauma. That's what I asked for.
And that's what I was saying about the fear being knit so thoroughly in those younger formative years, attraction and fear being joined for me. Like, that's still at the age of 40, like, come on now. And I can see my brain is doing the thing. Okay, I can acknowledge it now, and it's not in control anymore. But I remember my first, apart from being like when I came out and joined the gay world at 23, 24 and started sort of being in community and finding the support there, the most like inclusive moment I've ever felt, and this is actually, it was at a Dolly Parton concert, which for you, Stephen is more excited about Dolly Parton than anyone I've ever met. And she brought up this very handsome man in like a tank top, very huge arms, beautiful, handsome man on stage. And he was bringing her guitar, and she leaned over to the mic and said, "Any handsome ladies?" And all the women in this huge, stadium just cheered. And then she like stood up and then lowered her head again, "Any pretty boys?" And the other half of the stadium cheered. It was clearly the audience at the Dolly Parton concert, but it was the way she did it so unthinkingly. Like there was no sense of like, I'm making a statement or I'm doing a thing. And obviously she knows her crowd, but it was the amount of joy in the room more than doubled, it quadrupled. And I think it's sharing things like seabirds and like the stories we've talked about, it helps everyone. Like the most feedback I've gotten on seabirds so far is from straight people in their 50s who've been like, you remember these feelings. And I was there too. And I was not a queer boy with dealing with unstable parenting, but I relate so much to what this kid went through. And that to me was just like an unexpected gift of like being specific about my experience. It became universal.
Yeah, but the thing is, trauma doesn't necessarily have to come from an abusive household or an abusive situation. Trauma is a lot of it is inside. My trauma, I'd say 90% of it has sort of grown within me, because I knew I was different, and that sort of subconscious messaging has hit me from a very young age. And I knew at some point, I think I was about 6 when I knew I had to do this and start to go, okay, there's something different about you. I don't know what it is. God's not happy about it, but you just got to keep your mouth shut. And that fear as a child, I wouldn't wish it on any child. And I just hope that there's something that they can cling on to. I mean, I had nothing. I think the first experience I had of any queer media at all was Queer as Folk, which it was great, but I remember being 15 and going,
very
I don't want to
similar.
do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take drugs. I don't want to go clubbing, and which is fine, but it needs to start younger, because I knew what I was. I knew I was different. I didn't understand homosexuality because I was just so blinkered. But I mean, I knew I was different. And then I hit 11 and went to high school and thought, I know this is wrong, because the other boys are saying it's wrong, and it's an adjective. Gay is an adjective. It's not a noun. And that's when the anxiety really hit. And that's when you start to, I sort of closed down one half of my personality, and this other half came out. It's like, I'm just going to be the funny guy and be great. And I think a lot of my 40-year-old friends now would say, oh my gosh, I love you at school. You were so funny. And I thought, I was traumatized. You saw nothing, because I had no platform to express it. We didn't have social media. There was no literature, nothing at all other than this. And so, like you said, literature is that private, personal space. And it's a world in which we can escape. I've read the book twice and I love it. And sometimes I think the first time I read it, I loved it because I loved it. The second time I read it, I loved it because it reminded me of being young. And I thought, actually, I was quite happy when I had that crush. Like, you know, that first little buzz and that tingle of like, oh, I don't know what this means, you know. And it was a lovely sort of romantic memory. But for the young queer generations today, I just want them to feel that buzz and excitement, but not that oppressive fear that comes with it, like of being wrong or different, you know. It's not going to be the case for everybody, but it's a step forward.
A little bit. Oh, this has been amazing. We are just about out of our section of time, so I'm going to ask you the question you ask people on your wonderful podcast, Feed My Curiosity, which I think
I'm going to take a sip of my holiday beer for this.
Yeah, Feed My Curiosity, by the way, is Stephen's like absolutely astonishing podcast. If you just want to feel like happy for an hour, it's on Spotify. It's Stephen in a beautifully formatted, very like, so it's so well structured, which is what I like about it. It's predictable. It's always very positive. He interviews Bake Off contestants like Liam, Charles, and Prue Lee.
Yep.
He's one of the guests. Almost the entire cast of the Dairy Girls. Dr. Raj is on there. I mean, just like
yep. And Prue Lee as well was my final guest. Season 1.
I was listening to that episode before this to like prepare. So I'm gonna ask you the question: if you were a cake, what kind of cake would you be and why?
Oh, I've been asked this so many times and I never have a definitive answer.
Believe anything you say. It's.
I think I would be something. Oh, I didn't be careful what I said there. Cake flavor. I would be a rich chocolate cake in the middle. You know why? Because no one ever turns that down. Everybody loves it. It's kind of a crowd pleaser, and I think I've always tried to be like that. You know, I've always tried to be a crowd pleaser. And yeah, I don't sort of, as I'm older now, I don't sort of try to make people happy. I think either you like me or you don't. Take me as you find me.
Nice.
The outside of the cake would be decorated in dark royal blue with gold accents, because I can be classy.
Yeah.
And then it would have a little character of Dolly Parton on top.
It's perfect. It's the
perfect. To match my Dolly tattoo. I don't know if we can
yes.
do it.
Oh yeah, we can just
how much
see
I love Dolly.
Part of it. So what are you up to now, and where can we find you, and what are you doing next?
What's next? So I thought you meant now. I'm going back outside to drink my beer. It's currently 10:30 at night in Northern Ireland. But next, when I get back off my vacation next week, I will go back to teaching in central London. I teach baking at the Pro Cook Cookery School. Feed My Curiosity season 2, if I'm quick, will come out this year. I need to pull my finger out, and there might be some surprises coming in 2023, but I can't say anything just yet.
Nice, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been perfect. You are the best.
Thank you for inviting me.
We can't see the audience, but I'm doing this, and Grace is going to swoop back in.
I would love to have met you all in person.
We'll talk soon.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Stephen.
Thank you.
Have
Bye.
a great night. Enjoy your vacation.
I will. Bye.
Bye. That was so wonderful.
Isn't he great?
Was so good.
Isn't he just the best person?
Yes. I was like, can you just forego the rest of your vacation and stay here?
We'll just chat the whole time.
But just in the brief conversation you all had, oh my gosh, I just feel everything. I feel like I was all misty-eyed. I was just like, oh, this is like, everybody needs to hear this. So thank you. That was so fun too. And but you know what? I'm going to start this first by asking you that cake question. Do not turn it around on me, because I'm like, I don't know how to choose. So this is all about you today.
It's not fair.
So can you please tell us, because I know that we all want to know, an audience, so sorry, we have no idea what's going on with the chat, but please throw everything into the Q&A. We'll keep monitoring Q&A as well. Are you able to access it?
Yeah, for sure.
Because
And
people are saying hi.
I
So
can
this
see
is
all
a
the
question
greetings,
for
yeah.
Will and the rest of the audience. If you could be, okay, am I getting this right? If you could be a cake, what cake would you be and why?
Yes. And I apparently have to go now. And it's just fair because I caught Steven out with this one.
You do have to go, and I'm not going to because I'm like, oh my god, I love all the cakes, but
Because my instinct is to say a tiramisu cake because I love tiramisu more than almost anything. But I'm like, symbolically, does that fit? I mean, it's like rich and sweet and kind of like semi-formal, but also
well, I
not really
think that
classy in
since
the
you did
slightest.
write an email to Stephen, which he thought you were his mom, I think
Yeah.
the sweet and slightly formal really does fit.
It's also
So
very 90s, which to be honest, I finally accepted that I am, because that's when I was like 11, which is what my entire career is built on. So yeah, I'll say a tiramisu cake. We'll just stop there.
I love it. That was the first one that popped into my head too, because, and I'm not kidding, that's what I had for pre-event breakfast / brunch today, was a slice of tiramisu cake. And I'm like,
perfection.
Of course I did. I mean, that would normally happen anyway on a weekend, but this is extra special because Stephen was on too. So I love it.
His show, every celebrity on his show has to answer that, and their answers are hilarious because some of them, like Nicola Coughlan from Bridgerton and Dairy Girls, was just so she just could not tell you, completely derailed by this one. Like, you know, you can picture it. It was amazing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I'm gonna totally binge on that podcast after this.
What are we doing now?
No. So we're just gonna talk. We're gonna talk. An audience, throw things into that Q&A. We're gonna talk language of seabirds and congratulate Will on 2 book launches in 1 month. How many other authors can say that? I don't think quite a lot. Will, take us through a little bit of how it is that you are here today with 2 book launches in 1 month and what that has meant for you and your touring schedule.
So I'll start with how we got here. So I started writing Seabirds in 2019. It took me several years, took almost 2.5 full years to get that one written. And it's pretty much stuck to production schedule. It was delayed by 3 months because we ran out of paper as far as printing, but that one's been fine. Catch That Dog, I started writing in March of 2020 and then things changed. So that was my real pandemic book. And that was delayed by 5 months, I believe it was, something around those lines, again, by the pandemic. They were not supposed to come out back to back, but Scholastic was like, well, you're part of this season and we can't bump you forward because someone else is already standing there. So you have to do them. What was the question? Was about how did I get here?
Okay, well, you answered how we got here.
Okay, cool.
But now, what does that mean for your touring schedule? Like, do you have a break at all? Because you're doing a lot of events now.
I'm trying to. So the thing about publishing a book is before it comes out, you have a wonderful excuse to talk to people all the time and make a nuisance of yourself. And as soon as it's out, that goes away. Now it's 1 more book on the shelves. And next Tuesday, there's another 500 coming out, which happens every Tuesday. So it's a bit of a brain shift. I do have about a half dozen events lined up. They'll be on the event page on my website when I get my act together. Some of them are there now, willtaylorbooks.com. There's a couple up, but some of them we're still in the finalizing stages. So mostly virtual. I've got a few in-persons, but you should just ignore those and buy your book from University Bookstore today, because that's why we're all here.
We're here for that. And also Will is going to be stopping by to sign and personalize books.
Please,
maybe even, oh my gosh, maybe even, and he didn't agree to this, but maybe even draw little bird squiggles on the front page.
I will do whatever you want. If you buy my book through your bookstore, I will write or draw anything. I have no shame. Just request away.
Whatever you need. And in the Q&A, Craig says that he has an old-fashioned caramel cake, a sweet yellow cake with decadent caramel frosting. That sounds amazing.
That sounds
and Becca
great.
says Alice, who's 4, and I are listening, baking a galette, and talking about how people love each other.
Oh, hi, Alice.
That's so wonderful.
Hi.
Yeah. So okay, so that's where we are right now.
Catch
so this
That
book
Dog is getting a little bit lost, to be honest. Catch That Dog, which is, I mean, to be fair, like Seabirds is my big book, but I'm really proud of Catch That Dog. So if you feel like you need a sweet, silly buddy comedy about a dog, that's maybe
I highly recommend it. not only just because I was in conversation with Will for the Catch That Dog launch, but it is just, I've read that book a few times now, and I'm going to keep reading it because all of these just make my heart just grow bigger. So thank you.
That's what we're trying to do.
So this book is quite different from your others. And it also has a lot of appeal to older kids and YA, and I think adults can read all of them. But what was your writing process different at all for this particular book?
100%. It's a book about feelings, which I don't do. So I had no idea how to plot this book. I used a lot of devices. I used the 2 weeks. Sorry, my stand is extremely wobbly. I used the 2-week vacation framing device because I needed to restrict the boundaries of the story pretty hard. The 4th of July as a linchpin, I was like, I'm just going to go straight for all these techniques. There's a symbolism of 2 shells on the railing, the porch railing that I use to mark time. And because I'm such a plotter, I needed to know that I had these structural pieces built in, because the feelings were just like a big swirl of wibbly wobbly tiny whammy stuff. I just was off. People have feelings and then they react to them, and that makes them take actions. And that's not how I write. That's not how I write, because the magic key to the pillow forts has been found in the second sofa under the treehouse, and because the slime has turned, I write because chaos is about to ensue, because kids have done something magical. And so when things are about to change because one of the characters has had a feeling, I had to learn essentially how to write all over again, and finding the narrative voice was a real challenge, but I'm really proud of where it ended up. I think because I was sort of surprised that it was working. So that was like, I don't know if I could do it again, to be honest, because now I know how I succeeded, kind of. It was, I love the feeling of trying.
The cover is gorgeous too. Oh my God, I love it so much. How much input, so good. Everyone can see this. My light's just all over the place, but how much input did you get to have on the cover of this book?
So I got to send in a whole lot of comps of things that I loved, the style and the mood that I was looking for, but this is the exact cover that I was sent as an initial sketch, and it was obviously perfect. So we just stopped there. So I didn't get to make changes, but I got to pitch the mood, and I think that Tio captured it. Tio Duvall is a Seattle artist and comic book and graphic novelist. Links to everybody are through my website. If you just link through to willtaylorbooks.com, everything's on there, and you can check out Tio's work. Little Corvus on the social media. They are just an extraordinarily talented person, and covers sell books. Let's be straightforward about it. And as soon as I saw this one, I was like, also in the hardcover, I don't know if anybody's got one. There's a feather. You can't see it because it's blue, but there's a feather embossed under the.
That's awesome.
Can't see it at all. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's such a lovely, inspiring cover, and I love that it's a cover that someone like a kid can just look at and be inspired by as well. So it just says everything that this book represents. This is obviously very personal to you and touches on so many things that you went through yourself. And then, listening to you and Stephen, both of you went through a lot of this, and so many kids are probably going through it right now. Was the fact that it was so personal, was it easier for you to write? Was it like kind of writing in a journal and cathartic, or was it more difficult to write because you were trying not to put, as a writer, you probably put a lot of yourself into everything you do, but were you holding back at all because you were afraid it was too personal? What were your feelings about when you were writing?
So it was like writing an alternate version of my own life, because I never experienced this, but I know about it because I didn't. It was, this is what could have happened in an alternate version of the world where I was. The thing about Jeremy is he's braver than me, or at least he feels like he has more, maybe he feels like he has less to lose. He also has this experience of this first major romantic attraction to someone in a space and time that's very liminal. He's got the benefit of being on vacation. No one around him knows him except for his dad, who's not really interested in spending time with him. So he kind of has the opportunity to give it a try and to follow those feelings and see where they lead. And that it's almost, I do think of this kind of as a fairy tale romance, in that it's not, to me, it's not realistic, even though it is completely realistic. There's nothing it's just a crush. It's just a really wonderful crush between two boys. And it's, I don't like to use the word innocent necessarily, but it's so, they're both just finding out what those feelings are like. And the fact that someone reflects in the back of you is just, that's enough. You're good. That's, I mean, they hold hands. That's as far as it goes. Like, that's just the most exciting thing in the world. And I didn't do that at that age. So I did spend a lot of time experiencing those things with Jeremy, kind of for the first time for me. I kind of backfilled. I mean, it was like Stephen kind of said, I essentially healed my 12-year-old self who made a different choice and went back and was like, you see, you don't feel like you have this option, but I'm going to write it for you anyway. So I kind of.
Was that a cathartic experience for you to be able to go back and reimagine things in a way that you wish? Yeah.
Sad, for sure. I think that's something else Stephen brought up and that we've really talked about a lot, is that it does bring up a certain melancholy to be like, well, now we're 40. And that didn't happen. And it didn't really happen for me until my late 20s. And it's so wonderful to get to work with queer youth now, writing middle grade and doing classroom visits and stuff. I've connected to a lot of kids who are so solid and sure of themselves at 9, 10, 11, 12. And that there's this feeling of just being in awe of them and a little jealous. And also at the same time, so exciting. It's like, it's working. You know, we've got resources for you. You're growing up in a better place where you have mirrors and windows, and your friends have mirrors and windows, and your teachers and your parents' friends and the grown-ups are starting to realize, like, all it is reflecting the kids who were there the whole time, who didn't get to see themselves. And so when you asked if it was cathartic, it was, and it also is a little painful. But I mean, that's sort of the joy of one generation getting to pass on a better version of the world to the one after. I know the generation above me was in the heart of the AIDS crisis, and they look at us as the privileged ones, because obviously we are, in comparison, socially and culturally, it is getting, mostly until recently, it has been getting better. Yeah. I don't want to bring those people into this conversation today, because this is just a big, this is not for them. Well, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to do any spoilers or not, but I'll let you determine. So what was the most difficult scene for you to write?
Difficult, or?
And it could be emotionally difficult. Okay. It could have been technically difficult because of character building. Yeah. So yeah, I'll let you decide which way you want to answer that one.
The first chapter was really, I rewrote that like 6 times, start to finish. My agent had me keep doing it. My editor was like, absolutely not, start again. Just getting in the door, because it was a book about feelings, and you need enough backstory to know why your character behaves the way they do for the rest of the story. But I didn't want to get too much into the stuff that came, but it was a real technical struggle for me, and I'm very proud of what we ended up with. It's a bit of a cheat. It's a little bit of a cheat. Other authors will notice that, or like big readers will be like, oh, I see what you did there. But got you in the door. Emotionally, there is a climactic scene of conflict with a parent at the end. That was it was a lot. It took a lot. But I spent a lot of time in that one trying to get the beats of it right, trying to get the feelings of it. And the symbolism, I think, really ended up working in my favor. There's a lot of symbolism with glass throughout this book. If you haven't read it yet, glass appears in a variety of forms and has a variety of meanings. And I'm not giving anything away when I say that that's the chapter where the glass breaks. And it was the symbolism was so straightforward. And I was writing it, and I was like, this is a little on the nose, but we're going to go for it. This is fine. It's symbolism, and people can live with it. But I don't like writing conflict, but you have to in a book. And this was a very personal kind of conflict, and it was surprisingly easy to do, but harder to spend time with. Like that, I was surprised how familiar it felt, but that's getting,
Were any of the characters particularly troublesome to flesh out and write?
Ooh, Evan, the boy, the love interest. He's just a cinnamon roll. He doesn't have he's just a sweetheart. And it's not like trying to give him enough to be actually like a realistic character, and not just something for Jeremy to be like,
right,
I met a boy and my life changed. You know, he needs to be his own, and he doesn't really have a lot of conflict on his end, and he seems pretty solid and mature. But like, I knew kids like that who were just sort of like preternaturally just sure of themselves, even in a world that didn't seem safe. And Jeremy's bafflement at someone else's confidence is something I shared. And if you've read any of my other books, and Maggie and Abby, it's the exact same thing. Maggie is baffled by these people in the pillow forts who just seem so confident and sure of themselves, and they talk to people like they just assume things are going to go well. And I think that's a definite attitude that I have with all my characters. It's like, I don't know how you're doing that. And that becomes a bit of a fascination. And Jeremy can't figure out how Evan seems to be okay in the world all the time and not be hiding behind a pane of glass. And getting Evan to feel real to the reader while allowing him to be that for Jeremy was a definite. And I honestly don't know if I succeeded, but I mean, Evan, you need a cinnamon roll sometimes. You need just like a sweet boy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a problem.
I mean, and that's also, you know, like Jeremy's looking at Evan as that crush. So it's that beauty, it's that love and light and joy. And I think you wrote it so well. Speaking of joy, what were some of your most fun and joyful scenes to write?
Oh, so there's a scene with forts, because I add forts in all my books now, apparently. My editor was like, "This is your thing?" I was like, "Yep, gonna be now."
Your thing.
There's a big scene with driftwood forts on the beach. And there's a cameo from Abby, from Maggie and Abby's Never Ending Pillow Fort. She does a little cameo. Those were really fun because they were just sweet. I love when kids get to build their own worlds and go make up the rules and be safe.
Yeah.
And like really safe. And that for me was a joy to write. Yeah, I think that's the one that really stands out.
So are you building your own literary universe? Are we going to see? You know what?
Yes,
that smile told me everything.
I absolutely am. I've started.
I am so excited by this.
There's a few other projects. I'm working on like 6 projects right now. One of which is about baking, which you can make your own inferences from, given who our guest was. The worlds are linking up for sure. There are little nods and little pieces. Wait, there was something you said a second ago about arg. I forgot. Back to you.
Okay, no, that's great. I just also want to remind the audience, since the chat isn't working, please throw in questions and comments into the Q&A. And I have questions for you, but I also want to make sure we have plenty of time for audience Q&A. This is from Craig. Would you ever consider writing a YA sequel when these 2 boys meet again in high school?
So I don't want to, because I am so freaking proud of that ending.
Yeah.
I spent weeks on that final chapter, and I mean like actual weeks getting the pieces to feather together in a way that felt like I wasn't doing that. And to me, that final closing feeling is exactly what I wanted the book to end on, especially because when you are 12, high school and everything that's going to happen to you by the time you're 17 still feels pretty far away. And I don't want people to finish this book knowing there's a sequel that jumps straight to high school. I think books read differently if you know there's a sequel. And I like the way this one lifts off. I just realized it reminds me of the ending of Orlando, and that's why, the feeling of lifting off and the world is opening up. Thank you. That was a good connection. But it's been brought up by a lot of people. Several people have already asked about it. And if the book does well, Scholastic will probably want more. So I will not turn that down if that opportunity comes up. It just might not be what's expected. It might turn out.
You got starred review for this.
I got 2
starred reviews. Oh my gosh.
The Library Journal hasn't even reviewed it yet. So I'm like, come on.
Awesome. So awesome. Okay, so personally, as a birder and an artist of nature and someone who just loves romance, and I was like the most romantic kid too growing up, so much of this book appealed to me, and I have it bookmarked. I've got little bird page flags all over the place, and one of the many things that appealed to me was that secret code language that they use in the story.
I keep forgetting to talk about it.
You keep forgetting? No, don't.
At the heart of the book.
It's so good. So I think I pretty much swooned every time it used introduced, a new bird and just what the code meant. And so many of the birds are the birds that you see all around us here in the Pacific Northwest. So I love that too. And I remember I recently had returned from this birding day trip, and I was listing all the birds I'd seen, and you commented on my Instagram and said, those are some of the birds in the book. And I'm like, that is true. It's so great. So first, why birds? Are you a birder? Are you really interested in birds? Was there a lot of research that you did? So why birds? And what also was the inspiration behind creating this wonderful code?
Cool. Okay, so birds first.
Yes.
I'm not a birder. Some of my best
Mhm,
friends
mhm.
are very into birds. I think Amber is in the audience, and Amber spent, what was it, an entire summer counting seabirds on a Welsh island for some organization, and memorized all the seabirds and shorebirds of the Western United States. So I've had friends who are super birders. It's never been a huge obsession for me. I always just, this like in third grade, someone's like, what kind of animal would you be? I always wanted to be like a seagull because, and this comes up in the book, because they're not scared of heights. They can fly around, they can soar like eagles. They got the soaring and the flapping, and they can sit down on water, which is just cool. I mean, like the
God,
ocean
yeah.
is a chair. Like
Mhm.
that's anywhere you go, apart from like trying to sit on a branch and like do the claw thing, they're solid. They're good to go.
Mhm.
And they eat everything. So it seemed like a good plan. But I am obsessed with the vertical axis. And I think I've talked about this before. I got my undergrad in sacred architecture, so church and temple design, and most, not all definitely, but most sacred structures around the world involve and invoke the vertical axis in a way, mountaintop and cave archetype that seems to human brains to create the experience of what we would consider sacred or special. And as an adult, we do move most of our lives in the horizontal axis. This is like our power range, but kids are still in the vertical axis. They're still growing. They exist at a different part of the vertical axis than grownups. And that's why I love books about kids finding secret passageways, kids finding secret treasures, kids finding secrets that grownups don't even know about because the grownups are too busy being tall. And secret codes are such a huge part of that. And especially, we talked earlier about middle grade is the age when kids start to tend to read books that their parents haven't read. So they may have a secret language with their friends that their parents don't understand. I was really obsessed with the Redwall books, the Brian Jacques series at this age. And then going into 7th grade, my friends and I all started reading the Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan series. And so we would have these hours long conversations about the Aes Sedai and about the Tarman Gaidan and Trollocs, and realizing that no one else, our parents, don't even know what we're talking about, was such a great, just the visceral feeling of being part of a group because you have a code essentially. And so, yeah, that all married together with like bird name code. But the title, Language of Seabirds, which sort of inspired the use of the code and the creation of all these things. I was watching a documentary on Noma, the Danish restaurant that specializes in only Arctic Circle foods. And the owner, Rene Redzepi, was talking about creating a vocabulary of Nordic ingredients, like sourcing. He's like, we basically laid it all out. Like, we got 19 kinds of moss and 47 berries and 52 kinds of meat and bone marrow and mushrooms, and creating the vocabulary of Arctic ingredients with which to create a language of Arctic cooking. And I was watching that, and my brain was doing that sort of humming thing. And I think I was eating like gummy worms or something. And all of a sudden, the phrase, the language of seabirds, just went straight through my brain. And the image of one boy watching another boy run across a beach came with it. And that's all I had. And from that, the code became sort of the next, all my middle grade dorkiness basically just glommed onto that.
Gosh, I love that story.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the stories behind all of your books. I hope that you one day write a book about your books, because just how you're inspired, like what inspired you to write those books, I could listen to that like for an entire event. So
you should do a podcast where you interview authors. Like, what gave you that idea?
I know.
You're so good at that.
Oh my gosh.
Are you busy?
Okay.
Do you have like 800 projects going on? Grace is the busiest person.
I love that, Will. Oh my God, I love that.
You
801, what's the difference, right?
We just cram a few more days in the year. I'm sure it'll fit.
Oh my gosh, I know. Sleep, what is sleep?
But
But no, yeah, that's fascinating to me too. It's just, and you especially have the best inspiration stories. Really, really, I'm not even just saying that because I'm currently here at your event.
Well,
so you can quote me on that.
Kelly Jones, who's in the audience, has some amazing ones too. So I can definitely, there's other authors. Maybe we just share them with each other. Just like,
maybe, I know, maybe. Oh my gosh. Well, Kelly, I hope, yes, if I'm attending your event or anywhere near your event, I'm going to ask you that question.
Yeah,
so.
Can we add Kelly Jones's books to the link tab? This is growing by the minute.
And also, is anybody, because I don't even know, are you seeing the chat? Dear
I'm not.
audience, are you seeing it? I know we are, Will, because we're the panelists, so I'm seeing it, but I don't
can
even
see
have a way to
Q&A.
communicate with them through chat right now.
Oh, Anonymous says I have the loveliest voice. Oh, thanks. I've always been wildly self-conscious about it, and so that's really sweet of you. Oh, sorry, I'm reading
So
the
we
Q&A.
are
Oh yeah, we're running out of time.
oh good. They can see the chat. Perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, just we'll throw in all the links in there still. So let's see. Oh my gosh, the time. There's still so many things that we could ask, but let's talk about that audiobook really quickly. Are you going to
Can I,
do the audiobook?
Totally jump out to say a huge thank you to Miyako, who's doing, I don't know if you can see the events coordinator, who's doing all the behind the scenes, and there's a huge amount of work behind the scenes. So thank you, Miyako and you Bookstore. We have an audiobook. There is an audiobook. It was narrated by Michael Crouch, who was my first pick, and I am delighted. It is extraordinary. Michael is also gay and was able to really, we've connected over the book now too. So it seems like a lot of gays of a certain age are kind of linking arms. Like, if only. It's gorgeous. It's a listening library who is the iconic. I mean, they were Books on Tape back in the day. They are the audiobook producers. So I don't think that's in my wheelhouse. I don't think I've quite got the
but you are making fun TikToks. I love those.
Oh my God. Yeah, if you want to see me on TikTok being an utter embarrassment, it's Will Taylor Books.
I think that's the only way to jump into TikTok, but you're doing so good.
Genuinely enjoy doing it. And
yeah,
like, okay, that's good. There's no pressure.
Yeah.
It's just go be really silly and
exactly.
Paul Abdul and you're fine. Yeah.
So really quickly, since we're very nearly at time, very quickly, can you tell everybody about our wonderful Catch That Dog? Because I want, just tell them a little bit about that book so we can entice them to order it with this book as well.
So much ring light going on.
I know, there's so much light.
Catch That Dog is about, well, it's a comedy because of Winn-Dixie, basically. So if you've ever read any Girl and Her Best Friend Pet Animal, that's what it is. It's about the true story of 1953 masterpiece. The world's most valuable poodle went missing. He was dog-napped. Maybe he disappeared from his velvet pillow in the window of Poodles Inc. in New York City. He was the dog that started the poodle craze in the 1950s. Kind of Lexi Pulaski made it happen. He was a huge, big star. He had his own bank account. He got paid $25 an hour for modeling in 1953. He had a medal from the people of Haiti. He dined at the Ritz with the president of France. He was a huge celebrity. And one day he disappeared. So this is my story of what happened next. So there's this fabulous fancy poodle used to a life of luxury, and I had him end up in an alley in small town New Jersey, where he meets the poorest girl in town who desperately needs a best friend, and they go on an adventure. So if you need a silly, happy romp with a guaranteed happy ending, a lot of very silly grown-ups. I kind of took my cue from sort of classic 50s style, almost animation of all the grown-ups are very like 1001 Dalmatians kind of level, over the top, stock central casting characters, which was just so much fun for a smart but out of the fish out of water dog and a smart but underappreciated girl to get the best of. So yeah,
great book.
I wrote this as a pandemic. I wrote this during the summer of 2020, so it was entirely about escaping and feeling better about the world. So that's what this one's about.
And very last thing, so you put together a very fun playlist for seabirds. Can you please tell the audience where they can find that, and also really quickly about what guided your song choice?
So seabirds for me involved a lot of needing to go back and feel those first crush feelings, because I kind of reclaimed my romanticism in high school a little bit, even though I was even deeper in the closet and didn't act on it or share it. So I started to get the feelings of seabirds sort of in my brain again, so I could write them. I did spend a lot of time listening to the Goo Goo Dolls and a lot of really, really maudlin, emo-y 90s songs. And then with things like Heartstopper coming out, there's this whole new wave of very bouncy, joyful, almost like exuberant music related to queer love. And so I sort of married the two. I do have my own personal Seabirds playlist, which I will not be sharing because it is too embarrassing, but I made one of like the top 14 tracks, I think, many of which do correspond to chapters in the book and were very useful and inspirations. If you go to my Instagram or Twitter, if you go to my Instagram, which is at Ink and Hive, Sorry, it's not useful. I'm sure we can put it in the chat. It is saved. The link to the Spotify playlist is saved on my highlights for seabirds. So go to the Ink and Hive on Instagram, go to my profile. There are the little circles for the highlights. It's under the seabirds one. You can click through that to the Spotify playlist. I should probably put it in my link tree, and I probably will. So there is a link tree there also for everything else. Yeah, Will Taylor Books for TikTok, Ink and Hive for everything else. I should fix that.
Perfect.
WillTaylorBooks.com. Grace, I know we're almost here, so I want to actually ask you, what are you working on and where can we find you online and what are you doing next?
Well, as you mentioned, 800 and maybe 801 things now. Actually, right now, I did start a new job. So I'm working at Seattle Arts and Lectures. And so I've been spending the past few weeks really trying to learn a new job and a new culture and everything. So that's been taking up a lot of my time. But I'm also going out and doing some birding. I'm with the Seattle Audubon Society. And so birding trips, birding workshops, that kind of thing are some of the things I'm working on this summer. And trying to always like get more art time, more creativity time. I know that's always a challenge because you may have the time, but you also need that creative energy. And so just trying to like put more of that in my day. And you can find me and all of the things that I'm doing over on Instagram. And I believe Miyako put that link in chat, but it is just my name, Grace Rajendran. And yeah, so thank you, Will, for sharing. Oh my God, sharing everything here with us today, and for making us. I don't know. This is such a lovely, lovely afternoon, and having Stephen here too. And so, thank you, Stephen, when you do see this, for your wonderful part of this discussion as well. Thank you, Miyako and uBookstore for hosting, for all those wonderful links that are in chat. If you missed any of it, just contact uBookstore, and that's where you can order the books. You can just head over to their website. Will be by to sign and maybe draw little seabirds into your books.
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want. Next week, I believe.
Next Friday.
And so just let them know, and you can put that in the checkout notes. So again, thank you, Will.
Thank you, Grace.
Stephen. I hope you're having a great vacation. And thank you to our audience for spending this afternoon with us, and for all the lovely, lovely questions and comments. So everybody just have a great afternoon.
And if I didn't get your
question, one more thing.
Just feel free to email me at willtaylorbooks.com if you had follow-ups or anything else. I know I skipped a few things in the Q&A, so don't hold back. I'm around. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.